Everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Official Visit podcast. Tyson Alger here, joined by Andrew Greif. Today, our guest will be Jacob Thorpe of the Spokesman-Review in Spokane. He covers Washingon State University, and we're going to bring him on to talk a little bit about the Cougars, their start, and probably just end up talking a lot about Mike Leech and what it's like to cover that guy. But before that, bringing Andrew in by phone here. He's got to take care of the little one for a little bit today, but we'll be flying out to Spokane tomorrow. Andrew, how's it going, man?
Good. It's going well. How are you doing?
Can't complain. Spokane and Pullman, sneaky good road trip. I know it's not probably at the top of everyone's list, but I always enjoy it when we go out there.
The thing that I always am interested in, especially now this being my second time, is the WSU fans who hold the flags in the fields south when you're going south from Spokane on game day, and you just look out of like your car's window on like the right and left side, and there's like every few miles there's someone holding a Washington State flag, and it's super odd at first, and then I remember going to the stadium last time in 2014 and looking it up, and sure enough, it's like a tradition. People just stand with the flag.
Yeah,
of wheat fields.
That was the wildest thing because, like, for context, what is it? Maybe about like 100 miles from Spokane to Pullman.
Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah. And there's literally like nothing along that drive other than like fields. So these people are standing out there, and there's nothing for miles from them. It was just the oddest thing to see because I don't think either of us were prepared for that.
I definitely wasn't. It was. Yeah, I think that's what's actually the strangest about it, is that it's just rolling fields, and there's no trees to block anything, and then out so that you see for miles, and so that's why you can see in the distance, like, is that a person like on the right side of the freeway? Yeah, sure enough, it is. It just gets weird.
I remember Bruce Ely, who was with us at the time, was able to pull off and snap some really good photos, which isn't surprising because Bruce Ely's fantastic, but. So speaking of that, we're heading into Pullman this week. It's Washington State, a team that's performing a little bit below expectation as well. But Oregon's coming off its second straight loss, which is the first time they've lost two in a row since 2007. We haven't really talked on camera or podcast since that loss. What's kind of just still sticking with you after the Colorado loss, Andrew?
What's sticking with me is that last year Oregon had a slow start as well. They weren't 2-2 after two straight losses, but they had they were 3-3, and I never heard as public of frustrations as there have been this week, where guys are talking to reporters about the old guys are blaming young guys for not having the right mindset about being focused on all the swag and the perks and not working hard and messing around. Guys are throwing other guys, talking about how, hey, if you're hurt, you should not be going out on Saturday nights. You should be, staying home and getting treatment. Other older guys are saying, hey, it's not always the freshmen, it's also us. We're not setting a good example. So if they screw up, it's actually our fault. That was Dwayne Stanford, the receiver. There's just, I saw a redshirt freshman, Shane Lemieux, his quote saying that the culture here just isn't what it used to be, which was, it's a pretty big or / weird indictment to hear that, but it also came from a redshirt freshman in Lemieux, and so I just kind of wondered, how does he know what exactly the culture was like during the heyday when, the title year was a year before he arrived on campus. So there's just a whole lot of kind of, not trash being talked, but just a whole lot of frustrations being vented and aired in Eugene in a way that I haven't been around. I think about the 2014 loss to Arizona. The last time Austin Malawata, the defensive tackle, said that he could recall Oregon have a players-only meeting before this week, and you never heard a peep out of that. It was just like, hey, we lost. We need to straighten ourselves out, and then they went out and took care of business. This one, it's like you've heard now 2 weeks in a row of players having to stand up in the locker room and say, this is not who we are. And it's just a lot of noise, and I just wonder how focused they're going to be Saturday.
Yeah, I kind of going back to the thought you just brought up, that's the thing that's kind of surprised me the most is to find out about that players-only meeting they had after that Arizona loss back in the day. like you kind of had to pry to find that out. Like there wasn't people that came out and were screaming that we had a meeting afterwards. Whereas this one, it seems like it was all they were talking about. Like I just don't. It just seems odd. Some of the leaks aren't the right word for this week, but just the the lack of continuity between the message. Because I mean, the Oregon team that went to the national title game, it was pretty much everyone from the top down was along the same message. The guy who talked the most, Marcus Mariota, was always kind of preaching all the Oregon philosophies, and now it just kind of seems that everyone has their own opinion about something else and is willing to kind of talk about it.
Yeah, it's just a weird atmosphere going this week, and
it's fun to cover.
I don't know about you, but I look at the game ahead of this Washington, I should say, October 8th in Autzen. I mean that one right now. Weirder things have happened. Right now, that thing looks like a loss for Oregon. Washington's just playing pretty disciplined on defense, and I feel like the offense will do enough to win it some games. And so right now, that would project as a loss. And if Oregon loses this game, which is another clearly winnable game, just like the first four, I just if you think the noise is bad now, imagine after 3 losses or 4 losses in a row. So I'm really curious to see where the season goes by mid-season. Forget about November, like mid-October. What's everyone feeling like going into the bye week?
Yeah, I agree with you there because, Oregon fans the last pretty much 3 seasons actually, because going back to that Arizona loss, like they start sounding the alarms like whenever there's 1 loss or 2. But if Oregon loses this game this week, they could be facing potentially 4 losses in a row, which is kind of unheard of in this era of Oregon football.
Right. So a lot riding on this week, and it's going to be fascinating. Someone's going to leave Pullman very happy, or at least either on the right side of 500 or right there, and someone's going to leave feeling like their season, is not over, but is really trending the wrong direction, and it's only the first weekend in October.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think this is as good of a point as any to let's shift over to Jacob Thorpe and kind of take a look at the Washingon State side, because this is a team that I think a lot of people had picked as a potential dark horse pick for this year's Pac-12. They had a really surprising year last year, brought back a lot of pieces such as Luke Falk, who a lot of people consider to be one of the better quarterbacks in the country. Yet here they are coming into this Oregon week kind of sitting in the same position the Ducks are. They're coming off a bye week. They do have 2 losses, and we'll talk to Thorpe about that, as well as getting his favorite Mike Leech story. So this is where we're going to leave you, Andrew. I'll see you in Pullman tomorrow, I guess.
I'll see you in the airport tomorrow.
Okay, sounds great. Save me a seat.
I will, and some peanuts.
Yeah.
See ya.
Bye. Hey everyone, and we're back here on the Official Visit podcast. Tyson here now, sans Greif, but we bring in Jacob Thorpe from the Spokesman-Review. He is down in Pullman. He covers Washingon State. You can find all of his stuff at a Twitter handle that... Hey, Jake, what's your Twitter handle?
It's first and last name Jacob Thorpe and then SR for Spokesman-Review, so just at Jacob Thorpe SR.
Okay, so my first question to you is, what is the most ridiculous thing Mike Leach has said during the bye week?
Oh, well, the bye week's tricky because they kind of clam up and, hunker down and figure out how they're going to beat the Ducks during the bye week. So I think I'll throw it back to you guys. I think the most ridiculous thing he said during the bye week was when he called your boy John Canzano for his radio show and did it from a gas station in an elevator. And it was really funny because he was on the phone with Canzano for his radio show, and he kept having to. I think he actually went into the gas station and bought something while he was on the phone. He was like talking to the elevator attendant or something like that. That was kind of a wild interview, and he gave his thoughts on the recent presidential debate. So it's always interesting. It's never boring with Mike Leach, and he certainly didn't take a bye week from that.
So with him, is he playing a caricature at this point, or is this him? Is this who he is? I know you've been on this beat for a while now. What's just like your Tuesday interaction with Mike Leach like?
Well, the thing about Leach is that there's just a lot of faces to Mike Leach. He wears a lot of hats. When you think of a real Renaissance man, Tyson isn't this hyper educated Oxford scholar who happens to play cricket on his days off and speaks a few languages. I think your real
like you, of course.
Is the is the guy from Cody, Wyoming, who coaches football, but who's really, really, really into learning about how an airplane works, and has traveled the world and lived in Finland and lived in Italy, and so what you see with Mike Leach is just someone who's got a million different things going on in his head, a million different personalities, and sometimes that's the very gruff ball coach, and sometimes it's the guy you see at media day who's more than happy to give a good quote as long as it lets him plug his book. And sometimes you meet this really intellectual, inquisitive, earnest guy who really just is very curious about the world and how it works. And so I think when you only see snapshots of Leach, it can be easy to think that, so sometimes he's just playing this character because it's good for him and it's good for his brand. But really, I just think he's such a kind of a shape-shifting guy that you really have to spend a lot of time around him to ever get a sense for him.
Okay, so moving on to actual football, Washington State was a team that I think a lot of people thought could have been a dark horse for the Pac-12. They had a really surprising season last year. They kind of set aside that Portland State loss and really and they really kind of had a surprisingly great season. Especially highlighted by that double overtime win over Oregon at Autzen. You got the Cougars are 1-2 right now. They've had a lot of headlines, a lot of them negative. You had some of the off the field issues. You had Leech calling out his players after one of their losses. What's kind of what's it like out there on the Palouse right now? What's kind of the I don't know, the feel of this team?
Well, the fan base has really been through the ringer, Tyson, because like you've said, they had such high hopes coming into this season, and when it's a program that doesn't have a huge history of 9 or 10 win seasons to fall back on, when you have good reasons to think that this might be your year, when you return a first team all conference quarterback, his top wide receivers, most of the offensive line, all of your running backs, you've got a lot of playmakers returning on defense, it's really easy to talk yourself into thinking that everything is pointing in our direction this year. They've got 7 home games. It seems like there's just a lot going right for this team heading into this year. And it's maybe easy to overlook some sort of glaring structural flaws the team has. Just a real lack of depth on the defensive line. They've only got 2 sacks in 3 games, and both of those came against Eastern Washington. Some depth issues on defense, and they really couldn't afford this off the field stuff they've gone through. So, expectations are sky high, and then they lose their season over to an FCS team, and they're thinking, well, okay, we did that last year. We still reeled off all these wins. And then you lose the next one at Boise State. And then all of a sudden that 7-win schedule, or that 7 home game schedule, that's actually not that easy, because now you've got Oregon coming to town. That's a tough game. You've got to travel to Stanford, the highest ranked team in the conference. UCLA comes to town, and then you got to travel to Tempe, where they haven't won in forever, and all of a sudden you're looking at a schedule that can set up pretty quickly for a real big hole you'd have to dig yourself out of in the second half of the season. So I think fans were kind of shocked after they went from their highest high, coming off a season where everything went right, best case scenario season. All of a sudden you're starting to see sort of a worst case scenario where they're losing those close games. And then all this off-the-field stuff sort of compounds on the fan base. And while I think the fact that Shalom Luwani was not charged by prosecutors, Mike Leach sort of predicted that. He had his back publicly, and that came to fruition. I think the fan base feels a little vindicated right now. They've really been through a lot, considering that we're coming up to their 4th game right now.
Yeah, I think this game has so much riding on it for both teams right now because, as you just outlined with Washington State, Oregon's pretty much facing the same sort of scenario where they're 2-2 right now. They've lost 2 games in a row for the first time since 2007. And after this game, they got Washington. And I don't think many people are predicting the Ducks to keep that streak going against Washington. So Oregon could potentially be facing a 2-4 start if they lose this game. And same thing with Washington State with Stanford up next week. So I think both teams really need this game this week.
Well, it's just amazing because I think coming into the season, we all thought that this would be one of the two games, along with the Stanford-Washington game this week, that would really sort of tee up the Pac-12 North Championship. That, these teams play each other, then they flip next week, and if anyone came out of that week, these 2 weeks 2-0, they were probably in the driver's seat. Now, at least the two teams playing on Saturday, if they don't win, or whichever team doesn't win, is really looking like it could finish closer to sixth than first.
Was the Oregon win for Washington State, was that kind of the fan base and the players, was that their favorite win last year?
Well, I think for a lot of the players, their favorite win, and maybe because it came later in the year when they were really trying, when they knew they were good and they were really trying to establish themselves, was that truly last-second win at UCLA. Came down to a final drive in the Rose Bowl. So many of the players are from Los Angeles. I know a lot of the players, that was the one game their family came out and saw them play that year. So I think a lot of the players probably pointed to that UCLA game. But I think for the fan base, certainly, finally beating Oregon, especially considering the fact that even when Washington State hasn't been the program that Oregon has been over the last few years, they've had some pretty fun games. The last one in Eugene, when Ali Odi after the game was complaining about Connor Halliday throwing it 89 times. Then the next year they came up and played a sold-out game in Martin Stadium that came down to the last couple minutes. To finally beat a good Northwest rival when you've really been pointing at the school that your athletic director Bill Moose sort of built, I think for the fans that was just a huge win. And if you kind of look at the trajectory of the season, that's certainly when the team and the program kind of realized, hey, we can do this. They lost at Cal, but they felt like they should have won. Then they go to Oregon, they get that win, and that's when you really saw the season turn around for the Cougars.
My next question I want to ask you, just from someone who does a similar job to what Andrew and I do, we're so kind of entrenched in the Duck stuff. It's kind of, I like to say we're in a bubble. So sometimes it's hard to see it from maybe 30,000 feet up in the air. But, from your perspective, what's the read on Oregon these days? Does it feel like it's a program on the downswing? Does it look like they're just in a lull? Like, what do people outside of this bubble think about Oregon right now?
Oh, I think the image that one conjures up when they look at Oregon right now is that classic kind of like, statue of Saddam Hussein getting pulled down in that square in Iraq, and all the everyone else in the square is just freaking out. It's kind of like
this has got to be my headline now.
Knocked off the mountain, right? I think Oregon has just sort of dominated in recruiting and in facilities and in wins for so long. I think everyone sort of sees this as their opportunity to rise. I think your fan base at California is probably really excited about Oregon having some struggles. I think I'm sure the Huskies are pretty excited about it, and I know the Cougar fans are as well, because not only has Oregon been good for so long, but they've sort of just sucked up all the resources in the Pacific Northwest in terms of recruits and in terms of kind of branding and that cool it factor. All of a sudden, Oregon, maybe isn't so sure of its coach, and they've had trouble getting a quarterback to really kind of assume that Mariota mantle. And I think from the outside, your average fan probably thinks things are worse at Oregon than they are, just because they so badly want it to be true. It's kind of like what the Cougars experienced last year. They probably weren't quite as good as they looked, winning all those close games. This year, they're probably not quite as bad as they looked. I think Oregon certainly has some issues right now it needs to sort out, but I think everyone else is sort of, kind of champing at the bit, hoping that, the Ducks really are done and that they're about to enter this period of sustained mediocrity that's probably just not the case.
Okay, last question here, and then we'll get you out of here. Give me 30 seconds on why Washington State basketball will not be the worst team in the conference this year.
Oh, well, we had a chance to talk to Coach Ernie Kent yesterday, or a couple days ago, actually, and he's really building up the new players. You know what you've got in Josh Hawkinson, a double-double every game, but really that hasn't been enough to win. It just means you get that double-double every game. Ike Arabia will be fine, but he's really building up this freshman point guard, Malachi Flynn. He kind of sidled up to me at practice and started comparing him to what he saw from Luke Ridnour at Oregon. And if they've got a freshman Luke Ridnour at Oregon, then maybe they can be better than Arizona State. Maybe they can climb up to the lofty heights of ninth or 10th in the conference or beyond. But it's going to be a struggle. They lost some key players who transferred out of the program, and these freshmen. Well, Ernie Kent seems to think very highly of them. They were not very highly recruited, so
Right.
it's not like he brought in a bunch of one and dones who are going to take him to the tournament right away.
This is Ernie's third year now, I believe. Is there any pressure on him yet?
Well, it's interesting at Washington State because there's pressure from the fans and there's pressure from the just sort of general apathy from the fact that no one is coming to games right now. But he's got a 5-year rollover contract, and Bill Moose has shown no inclination to stop that over. He's got a very prohibitive buyout, and the school is really strapped for cash right now. So in terms of could they fire him, no, they could not fire him for 4 years at least. I mean, he is super safe. His seat is very cool. But in terms of winning the fans back over and sort of establishing the program and giving himself something to sell to recruits, I think there's a lot of pressure. Last year really was just a punch in the gut to the fan base, because if you recall, his first year, everyone thought they did really well. They more than doubled their conference wins from Ken Bones last year. They were doing some stuff. They looked like a team on the rise. And then that 17-game losing streak to end last year really just evaporated all of that goodwill, it seems like. So they've certainly got an uphill climb to just show people that this program is growing and it's one that can at least dream of success down the road.
Okay, actually, so last question here. There's no football road trip that compares to the Pac-12 tournament in Vegas, right?
Oh, of course not.
Okay, cool.
Though I've heard great things about the Alamo Bowl from you folks, and obviously the Sun Bowl host committee is unmatched in its hospitality.
I've heard that about the Sun Bowl as well. The Alamo Bowl is fun for about 4 days, but when you're there for 8, it's a little flat out there.
We'll try El Paso for 10 and then try getting snowed in for 11.
Oh, yeah, no kidding. Hey, well, we really appreciate you coming on. You can find all his stuff on Twitter at Jacob Thorpe SR. You can go to spokesman.com. Is that correct?
Yes.
Spokesman.com. Jacob Thorpe, thanks for joining the Official Visit podcast, and I'll see you in Pullman on Saturday.
My pleasure. Looking forward to it.